Is property investment still worthwhile? Find out in today's YouTube video. So, is property investment still worthwhile as we head into 2022? This is a question we get asked a lot. Taxes, they always seem to be targeting landlords, and does tax make it not worthwhile to invest in property anymore? Have the government got in their way and driven private sector landlords out of the industry to try and basically stop the pressure on home prices keep creeping up as investors buy the market? Well, we're going to talk all about it today in today's YouTube video, but before we get stuck in, obviously make sure you're giving this video a big like and hitting that subscribe button with notifications turned on. So, property investment, is it worthwhile? I suppose the first thing to do would be talk about what is property investment. So property, you've got loads of different strategies, loads of different ways to invest in property. What is property investment? So the default, or the kind of de facto method of property investment, is buy to let. That's what most people do, is you buy a property and you let it out. So you buy a property historically in your own name, you would get a 75% mortgage, you would need a 25% deposit, and then it'd be an interest only mortgage, and you would use the rental income to pay the monthly mortgage payments, and you'd pocket the difference. That was basically how things worked, and a lot of people became very, very wealthy as property prices continued to go up. The interest was very, very low, so the rental profits were really, really high. However, 2015 things changed. The Chancellor of the Exchequer at the time, he basically changed the way that interest relief was allowed for landlords investing in their own name. Historically, you would basically get your rental income, less all of your mortgage expenses, and that would be your profit upon which you would pay tax. If you're a basic rate taxpayer, 20%, higher rate taxpayer, 40%, or an additional rate taxpayer, 45%. That changed, and what happens now is that it was basically gradually phased in over 4 years. Here we are, 2021, much later, so it's fully phased in now. And rather than having any tax relief or your mortgage interest being an allowable expense, you just have your mortgage, your rental income, less your general overheads, not including mortgage interest. That's your rental profits, and then you're going to pay tax on those rental profits. But what you do receive is a 20% basic rate tax credit for the mortgage interest costs. So for higher rate taxpayers, additional rate taxpayers, they're significantly out of pocket, and they're paying tax on profits they don't actually realise from a cash point of view, because from a cash point of view your profits are less your mortgage expenses, whereas from a tax point of view you're not getting any relief on these, so you're significantly out of pocket. These increases basically put a lot of landlords in difficult places. They had properties that were previously very profitable, and now because of the amount of tax they're paying, we've seen it where people are paying more in tax than the rental profits are actually making, so they're worse off keeping their rental properties. This unfortunately led to a lot of landlords selling their properties, and as a result many people have said that it's just not worthwhile investing in property anymore. Section 24 has killed off the buy-to-let market. Well, this is true to some extent, in that people wanting to grow large property portfolios probably shouldn't invest in their own name. If you want to grow a serious business out of it, investing in your own name isn't really worthwhile anymore because of these tax changes. But that's not the be all and end all. There are other ownership structures, such as a limited company, which has now become a common choice for buy-to-let investors, in that when you invest via a limited company, you're going to pay corporation tax as any normal company. So much like a trading business, you would pay corporation tax at 19% currently, going up to 25% in 2023. But this tax you do actually pay on your profits. So you are still allowed all of your mortgage interest expenses as a tax deduction, and then you just pay corporation tax on your profits, which means you have to make money in order to be paying taxes here. So in this case, it definitely is still worth looking at investing in property, and tax definitely hasn't killed it off, but it's just made it less favourable, and it's only the bigger players, the people who want to grow the larger property portfolios, that can really make serious money in property now, because you need to have that ownership structure in place, such as a limited company, to maximise your tax savings. Whether it's still worthwhile or not depends on your own investment criteria and the return that you're looking to get. Essentially, vanilla buy-to-let, which is where you go and buy a property that doesn't need any work to it, putting a tenant into it, can still generate significant returns It's not uncommon in Peterborough where I invest. You could do that and you could probably get a 10% return on capital. So it's always important to look at the return on capital side of things, which is I'm putting a 25% deposit in and all your other cash, the stamp duty, legal fees, looking at the cash you're putting in, not rental yield. In my opinion, rental yield is a useless calculation, it doesn't tell you anything, and it certainly doesn't help you compare property to other investments. You need to look at the return you're getting on cash employed. If you're putting £100,000 into it and you want a 10% return, £10,000 a year, you need to be looking at that 10% return. But if it's got a 5% yield and you're purchasing it for £250,000, that's not going to help you realise that. But if you were to invest £100,000 in property, £100,000 in the stock market, that's what you'll need to look at. If you put in the stock market, historically your average return is probably going to be somewhere around 5%. So it's a 5% return on capital employed. When you factor in that you're putting £100,000 in, you're getting a 5% return. That's a £5,000 return. Compare that to property where you can get a £10,000 return based on a 10% return on capital, then obviously in that case property is the better investment. Obviously you'd always need to seek professional independent financial advice, and it's important not to take investment decisions off of a YouTube video, but this is just general guidance when it comes to looking at how to appraise different investment decisions. Look at the return on capital. The reason it is higher for property is because you can leverage your investments. In property you're going to borrow the money. Historically you can borrow basically 3/4 of the property purchase price, 75% loan to value, which bumps up the return on capital because you're only putting, when you buy a house for £100,000, you're only putting 25% of your own money, the property value in, £25,000. You're borrowing the 75, but you get to keep all of the rental income. So the full rental income comes to you, and then you just pay the bank a small amount of interest on their 75%. Compared to other investments, such as the stock market, you can't really leverage them, so as a result, the gains are much lower. Of course, with other investments, you do have tax-efficient wrappers, such as ISAs, if you did want to invest in the stock market. Certainly, you should look at using your ISA allowance if you've got the extra spare cash, because it's certainly tax-efficient to do so, and you see it in the papers all the time, ISA millionaires, if you put your maximum entitlement in about £20,000 a year, with the growth on that, it's quite easy, when done consistently and early on, by the time compounding takes effect, for you to become an ISA millionaire. But compare that to property investment, there's no real tax efficient wrappers, but if you're in a limited company, you want to build a large investment portfolio, you'll be paying corporation tax at 25%, but you can retain the 75%, so you get to keep 75% of your profits in that case, to keep building up that property portfolio and reinvesting. So it's really good that the narrative in the market is that property investing, basically from a tax point of view, has come out of favour, because what this means is that there's going to be more opportunity. So the more people are saying that it's no longer worth being a landlord, the more opportunity there's going to be for people that are willing to put the work in and are willing to take those risks. Obviously there are other factors to consider. The regulatory landscape for property is changing all the time in terms of gas safety, electrical safety, now EPCs as well, the minimum C requirement, I think that's due to be enforced from 2025. Obviously that's still early days on that yet. There are potentially rumours that they might be scrapping that, but obviously there are still those kind of risks, as there are in any other business. You run an accountancy business, you need insurance, you need to comply with the professional bodies, there's a lot of admin that comes into it. But when you run a business, you need to be aware of this. So basically stop looking at property as a passive investment, a way to invest money for the long term and not do any work for it. Really, the ones who are going to make money, in my opinion, over the next couple of decades are the ones that are looking at property as a business, as a long-term play, where you can add value to properties, do development in properties. That's where the real money is to be made over the next couple of decades. I hope you found this video useful. Please do make sure you give it a big thumbs up and let me know in the comments whether you think property is a good investment still. I'd love to hear from you. Bye for now.